Let's talk about this.
The bit that sits under the water and that bounces up and down, that's the rooms they give us. The worst rooms.
A ship gig about 4 years ago actually.
When they told me what was required, I kind of held back and didn't put myself forward. I said, give me some more time. You're telling me how much I need to do on the ship, what style you want, very clean, you want a family-based show, that sort of thing. So I held back for this particular ship. I think it was P&O at the time.
And it went through a number of agents, and the gig itself went well. And then when I came back, I realised that there were like 2 or 3 agents involved and all that sort of thing. It took me ages to get paid, and I think although I did well on the ship, by the time I got back, I just sort of went to these guys and said, this is just not even worth the trouble, because I literally forgot, about the gig. And I thought, well, if that's ships, then it's not even worth doing.
And I waited a little bit longer until I felt I was ready. Then all of a sudden, Simon Palomares, he contacted me and he said, look, there's a new ship coming out and they've asked me to put some comedians together. He said, I reckon you'd be good at, I'll put you forward.
Then there was one other one for celebrity cruises, which was like very upmarket, very old, very well-heeled American audiences. That sort of went okay, but I didn't get any callback on that.
So it was a complete baptism of fire, as it turns out. Looking back, I just laugh at what we had to do, what the requirement was.
The really thing that you have to be careful with the cruise lines is that you really have to make sure you know your gig before you get onto a cruise line.
I'm talking about Carnival ships now, right? So there's P&O and there's Carnival, and Carnival owns just about everybody, but they operate independently. So this is the classic American Las Vegas on the water, coming out and then asking us to do a stack of shows across sometimes only 2 or 3 days, and all different style shows and different length and different audiences and things. So it was as I said, it was a baptism of fire.
Because it's almost like the first gig is like the biggest tryout, right? And if that gig doesn't work, then literally the name will be off that list for that cruise line. My biggest experience with the ship started on the first voyage of the Carnival Spirit to Australia. I was the first Australian comic with Brune Lucia on that first voyage into Australia. That was about 2 years ago.
Cruise gigs, on the whole, depend on a lot of different factors. And the reason it can be, I find, a real challenge, and I love the challenge, is because psychologically there's a lot going on. And
it's got its own comedy club. It uses about between 4 and 6 comics per cruise. You do between 4 and 5 shows, family shows and that sort of thing.
For example, cruise gigs can be awesome because you'll have potentially 400 people who head straight downstairs after a big show upstairs and they just want to pack in and see your show. Or they saw you on the opening night do 5 minutes and they thought that was great and they want to come.
The first thing is I walked into this beautiful comedy club, right, which is really one of the best comedy clubs I've ever seen anywhere. 300-seater comedy club. That line in particular has got, there are 2 different ways of working on the ships. One is through the ships that have got comedy clubs, right? On the other ships that haven't got comedy clubs, I work the main stage.
They sometimes throw extra shows at you at the last minute that you don't know much about. Sometimes they'll tell you, look, we've had to push your show back, you're starting at 11:30 p.m. on the opening night. So you say, hang on a second, so do you mean that the people have travelled for 12 or 13 hours to get to this ship from Perth to Sydney, and then they've had to wait to get on board, and then they get on board and they can finally find their room, and then they go and eat, and then they're exhausted, and you're telling them they've got to come and see a show at 11:30. So then they're all sitting there absolutely wasted, and they're there because they want to get their money's worth, but they're very different from the other crowd I mentioned, who 400 have come down and they're rocking and ready to go. So that's the second thing.
You've got to remember that you're part of, a company.
Thirdly, the demographics can change massively depending on the length of the cruise. So if you do a 7-day cruise, you'll have, in holidays, for example, everyone's under the age of about 40.
Once you actually do that, what then you realise is that that's your only job.
So your material can change, or your attitude sometimes has to change. It doesn't have to, but it depends on how you deal with it,
Once they know that that you're right for the job, it just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop.
I'm probably meant to say no, and boats are really daggy, and who'd want to work on a boat? But in actual fact, turns out my uncle was actually a cruise director. So the cruise director is the head of entertainment, and this is back on a ship called the Royal Viking Sky in the 50s and 60s. And he showed me when I was a kid. He showed me old photos. He was the guy who, he'd say, go and get the teapot for me. So I'd go and get it, I'd open it, and snakes would jump out. And I thought it was the coolest thing to work on a ship. So it was almost that, that little bucket list thing.
I also become countryless on the ship. I'm not. This is the other thing. I'm not an ethnic comic.
Yeah.
As soon as I leave Australia, right? I'm an Australian comic.
Yeah.
And they sort of, look at my style, and that's a great thing for me. That's that to actually just be in front of an audience that doesn't know who I am.
Yeah.
And you just have to prove yourself from the first line.